And sometimes you do question, do I want to do this? Do I want to continue to do this? What we can do is say we have intention, but then we don't have direction.
I think one of the temptations that we face when trying to grow in character is almost this fear of being taken advantage of. Understanding what makes you 101 has everything to do with you and nothing to do with you. Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I'm here with Mr. Adrian Crawford. And I usually ask him, how is he doing today, sir? And if you listen to the last episode, we had a conversation about how we're going to start giving honest answers.
Yeah.
How are you doing today?
Not great. My back is killing me, so no, I've got...
His back's been spazzing
all morning. So, but hey, gotta give the people what they want.
If we start being honest about how we're doing today, they're just going to hear a bunch of our physical ailments.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Because Bree, again, if you didn't know Bree and you never saw Bree, you'd think, and she explained her ailment, you'd be like, oh man, she's 55 years old.
No, actually, I do live the life of a 40-year-old.
Yeah. So anyway, what's happening today?
Oh man, today? What's happening today?
Yeah, what's happening?
I have all these interviews.
You do.
Very exciting things. We're expanding the business, of course. And so I have a few different interviews for some new team members. It's going to be really fun to look into. Yeah,
it is going to be fun. Yeah, a lot of talented people. And again, and I love it because, again, we're living in a world right now where people are being laid off and things like that. So, yeah, hopefully we find some good fits and people we can actually bring on.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to jump right into it. Last week we ended up doing a little side quest.
Yeah.
Into just talking about culture, the cultural moment. So today we're going to jump back into Magnum Opus, The Art of Becoming One of One. And we're still in the chisel.
Yep.
And so we are going to focus on today the Rule of 77, which was Oscar, our producer. It was his pick. Thank you, Oscar. So just to start us off, can you describe a little bit about what the chapter, or I guess it's not a chapter since the book really isn't made up of chapters, the section, devotion of sorts. What was the purpose of Rule of 77 when you first wrote it?
Really, I wanted to talk about how mainly again, the rule of, when you look at it, the Rule of 77, this idea of how interest compounds, right, over time. It's a financial, when you look at the financial term of it. So normally what it is the Rule of 72, and then I want to be a little bit more audacious and say, hey, 77. But what it is about compounding interest. And one of the things I thought about is, over the years and over the time, what is actually compounding interest in your life? What's something you can do that if you are consistently doing it not just grows just a little bit, it kind of just, can escalate, over time, and next thing you know, instead of having 5, you've got, 50. And what I started realizing was this idea of character and faithfulness is really that as you are doing those things, it actually has this exponential type of growth to it. When you actually are, when you operate from a place of character, when you operate from a place of kind of faithfulness.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I first started reading the chapter of the book, you really open up by just describing the Rule of 72 and how it's a practice that people use frequently, especially bankers, investment bankers, to determine when they're going to receive a return on investment. And you started to really reframe that that equation into what does it look like to invest into your own character, which I thought was very interesting. And I think when we think of Magnum Opus, The Art of Becoming One of One, I think people will look at that title and, first they're going to look at the book cover and be like, is this a cult?
Yeah. Shout out to the Illuminati, right?
And then, which we did do on purpose a little bit. So all jokes. But I think that they would look at that title and think that this book is going to tell me how to become incredibly skilled. But you continue to take the chapters back towards your internal frameworks and back towards character specifically. And so that's what I found really interesting about the Rule of 77. At first, whenever I was reading it, I've been doing so much math for what we've been doing. Like, oh my God, I'm so over this. I don't want to see anything else about this right now. Right, yeah. So I was really happy for the shift into character.
Shout out to Big Harv.
Shout out, man. Lovely people. We're doing lots of great work, of course. All that being said, I would just love to hear why do you think I think that I can understand a very clear equation at this point with all the work and math that I've been doing on how to present to people when they would receive a return on investment financially, and to our business when we would receive a return on investment financially. How do you translate that into something like character?
Yeah, I think how it translates is because I think that a lot of times, you just go through life, right? You learn a skill, and that skill can you learn something, gives you the ability to do that. But you learn that skill, and it's I look at that more like addition, right? I look at character as something that actually does multiply, because I feel like as you are making decisions and you're doing things, whether it's behind closed doors or not even just behind closed doors, it's and again, when I talk about character, I want to be really clear. There's so many different things. You say, okay, are you using it from a biblical standpoint? Are you using it from a societal standpoint? Because some people, what they would deem character in one country is not what it means to have character in this country. But what I look at is, again, for me, I have a biblical belief, but I also want to kind of move it to more of more like your values, right? It's the idea that when you have you have internal core values that you hold, and do you actually hold those values when times get tough? Do you hold those values when no one is around? Do you hold those values? And what I've learned over time is those values actually, they begin to expedite, they begin to have exponential growth in your life. They begin to actually allow you to have greater wisdom. They begin to allow you to have greater influence, because again, I believe character is something that gets announced way more and way louder once you walk in a room. You can just tell someone who really is integrated walking in character when you spend 2 minutes with them, and people want to be around people like that. And so I think it actually gives you just exponential growth, and even understanding as well who you actually are as a human being. And so I think that's why all of it kind of weaves. It's not only just what it brings to people or what it does as far as your influence, but no, actually helping you exponentially understand who you are.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess if you can have a return on investment in your character, how do you know, what does that actually look like? Does that look like opportunity? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think when you're getting a return on your investment with character, I think what it means is that you begin to have people around you that maybe, so for example, I think a thing for me is really empowerment. That's a value of mine, and I do believe that that's a part of character. Do you actually use your power to leverage it for other people? So what does that look like? I think you can start to notice that when all of a sudden you begin to have more people around you, that you then have the ability to actually use your actual values and your empowerment to actually help them to be able to do that. I actually had a text message the other day, a voice memo from someone who works for me, and that's one of the things he said to me. He was like, man, just thank you for being such a good friend, because he was like, when no one else saw who I could be, you saw who I could be. And then he said this, he's like, and then you demanded greatness from me. He's like, there was no other option. You demanded that from me. And to me, why I knew that grew, because now that individual is now in a different city making an impact there. So that's what I mean by exponential. I was able to, I was fortunate enough for him to be able to come into my life, and then I was able to have the character not to take my power or him working for me to lord it over him, but to actually to empower him. Now he's now going somewhere and he's making incredible impact in a different city. And again, that's what I mean, that I can't reach that city or make an impact in that city the way he's making an impact. So that's what I mean, if that makes sense, that exponential growth. Yeah,
that makes sense. And then I'm also interested, whenever you invest your money into something, it's never fun. You're taking a lot of risk. You don't know if it's going to even work out. Hopefully you've tried to predict it as much as you can. But there isn't an immediate return. And it doesn't feel as good as it does making the money when you start to receive the return. And there is a huge risk there. And so would you mind, even in that example that you just said with your friend, I guess, what are the behaviors and interactions that you committed to that didn't feel good, that later you realized that you and that person were receiving a return on that investment?
Yeah, I'll start with him even leaving. Okay, let's kind of fast forward it. When he left, it was me who was really, really pushing him to go, because I knew that was the next step for him. But now here's the thing. I legitimately, me and him were like good friends. I didn't want him to go anywhere. And he was at a place now where he'd been developed so well. We're like, man, he was carrying significant weight within our organization. And for me to sit there and look at this man after helping develop and build him with his, again, with his hard work and doing all that, and then say, hey, nope, it's time for you to go somewhere. Like I tell people that's very difficult, because those are the moments where you're like, oh, no, I want him to stay here because that takes a load off my plate. I can kind of go do some other stuff, whatever. But I always say, like, if this is the right thing for that person. So that's what I mean. It's like, I think as a leader, for me, I'm using that example of empowerment, is that it was one of those things to where, man, like this would have been selfish for me to keep him here. He would have stayed here. But for his well-being and for his next step of development, it was to send him and to go. So that's a practical thing. Day to day, what that would look like for me would be giving him opportunity to do things, but also being engaged with, not just giving him stuff to just get off my plate, but actually stuff that was going to help him grow and develop. But then also, what did that look like? It was me demanding like the most out of him. He grew up in a world, for example, where he had no one really ever demanded him. They let him just be mediocre. So what was very difficult about that is like there's times where I'm like, he could have at any point in time says, I don't want to do this anymore. Nah, man, this is too difficult. You expect too much. You're just you have unrealistic expectation. You're a workaholic. He could have said any of those things, but I knew for him to be what he had to be, I had to be the one that helped apply pressure to his life. And what did that look like? Sometimes I was a bad guy. That I would seem like the bad guy. I could be like the villain. I could end up being the villain to his spouse. Or to somebody, because you're like, oh man, why? Because he would go home just like any spouse probably would, and you talk to your wife, your frustrations, whatever. And I could be the villain, but to his credit, he knew my heart for him and doing that. So I think that's kind of practical. I think sometimes it's doing difficult stuff even when you may be seen the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Let's say, for example, character for someone is like, man, it is really to, you may have the ability to just want, you're actually called to invest, resources or money or whatever it is into people. And when you do that, it's going to be, like you said, it's painful to do those things. And so you've got to be willing to do that even when it's incredibly painful.
Yeah. I guess I just want to continue to dive into that even more, because I have seen you live this reality, and I think you're telling the story intently and purposely, but I also think that it kind of glazes over like the what it actually feels like to really, invest into what you value and not feel like it doesn't feel like you're gaining anything from it. And then you have to then you're also dealing with the fact of like, well, I don't do this to gain something from it, but also I think I kind of do.
Yes, 100%.
So, could you speak on that?
Yeah, I know, and that's a good point. It is incredibly painful. It's very like your values should cost you something. I think so many times people, it's my values. No, like your values, if you value something, it's costly to value something, right? Like, I mean, tell me something that you value.
I value wisdom.
Okay, so you value wisdom. Great. Okay, to gain wisdom, is that easy?
No.
Okay. A lot of times it's having to process things that you went through, not just like, oh, okay, but actually like spend time, think through it, right? Like, I mean, so like it's costly for you to gain wisdom. And you have a value, it's costly. And I think that means when something's costly, that means it's painful. And so I think for me, like I have a value of like diversity, right? Of building diverse worlds. That's painful. Why? It's because sometimes people who work for you who don't look like you sometimes can say things or do things and not realize what that can impact you or trigger in you or whatever. Or they could, or other people could look at you and then in one moment, people who I was told not to trust, they can do something to make me not trust them. And I still have to step up and absorb that and still have to, what's the value? Diversity, not just when people are all treating me right or they all understand where I've come from. And so again, it's incredibly painful. It's one of those things to where, man, sometimes you do question, do I want to do this? Do I want to continue to do this? Do I want to continue to respond this kind of way? I mean, those are just some of the things that you actually have to walk through in that process. But what I have seen over several years is that when you do that, I believe like your impact, I think there's something like that's just unseen that happens. You begin to have way more influence. People begin to want to know more. I mean, you can just walk in rooms and something's different about you because you kind of, that's what I see. I've been around people like that where they just walk in rooms and you're like, yo, there's just something different about them. And when you get around them, you're like, oh, no, this person is a high character individual.
Yeah, I guess I feel like if I were to describe the difference in seeing it and experiencing it, I would say the difference is that people trust you. I think that especially when you walk into rooms or industries where everyone's on edge because you're kind of constantly paying attention to who's trying to get theirs and who's trying to, slight somebody else for their own like name and image. I think there is something about walking into a space and people realizing like, that person is going to do what's good and what's right regardless. And even if they don't always do what's right, I can trust that they're always going to try to.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because I think that what you then have to do is you then have to build systems within your world that your values can play out. So I can't say I believe in empowerment. I know we've been focusing on that when they're development or whatever, and then build a system within our consulting firm to where we're just constantly over and over and over again upselling people to make them be dependent on our consulting firm. We had a very clear picture. No, we want people, like, we have done our job, even though it's painful, right? We've done our job when you don't need us anymore. Like, we had a client who, almost a year ago, who offboarded, who was one of our first clients. And again, high ticket client. And then also they were one of our most productive clients as far as like just real impact and change. I mean, they were at a place where they didn't know if they were going to make it as an organization to now being one of the top in their industry. And they do give us a lot of credit for actually helping them be able to do that. Well, in that, when they stopped working with us, man, that was a big dollar amount that no longer was here. Now, what we could have done, let's go in there and start to figure something out to do this. But if we say we have that value of empowerment, we've had to build systems in order to be able to do that. So I think that's the other thing too, is that you have to, whatever those things are, to walk in character, to walk in things you say that you actually matter to you, then are you building systems within your organization, within your life, within your family, whatever, that actually allow that to happen? Because what we can do is say we have intention, but then we don't have direction. We don't have organization that actually lets us live out that character, right? So let's say you're a person, man, I want to be a person who is, who's a truth, like I want to be a truthful person, right? Well, here's the thing. What type of people do you hang out with? Are you ever in a place to where people you're around, like people who've been with you for a long time, who can actually check you when you're not being truthful? Because if you're always in a world with people who don't really know you, that's setting yourself up to always be able to lie because, oh, that person doesn't really know me, that person doesn't really know me, whatever. So I think you have to be thinking about systems. And I'll end here. I think so many times in life, why people do not live out what they say they value is because they don't think at layers and depth of what all has to go into that. It's just not, I think or I feel this matters to me. That's the beginning. But it's like, then how does that play out? And then how does that play out in your world? And how does that play out in your family? How does that play out in other stuff? And I think that's a real thing that has to happen. Because I mean, what if, like, if one day you have a value, but your husband's value may not be that same value. So then how do you navigate that in a way that's, that both of you are respecting each other? And so I just think that's how you have to think a lot about how you live. And I think when you do that, it does become exponential.
I think one of the temptations when trying to grow I think one of the temptations that we face when trying to grow in character is almost this fear of being taken advantage of. Yeah. Is that something that you've experienced?
Absolutely. Because it's like, because of what we say, oh, nice guys don't finish first, right? Or it's, people say that, business is cutthroat. It's, it's dog eat dog world, right? The, survival of the fittest. People just, and that's kind of the world you live in. And it is true. And I came out of an athletic background where it was that as well. It's like, no, man, there's like, it's like you step between these, between these lines, and it was the toughest. It was those who were the most prepared and the best, whatever. And so what you can do in the times, here's what I'll say. When you decide to live out values and characters in the ethics of your life, there are going to be moments where you will lose. And what I mean by what you'll lose if your scoreboard is based off of what other people think victory looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So people could say right now that, man, I'm losing because of the idea that, man, the level of and how fast I could move if I said, hey, you know what, I'm going to go in and hire all these senior level people and go from there. But I've had a really an important desire to develop the next generation. So somebody like yourself, right? It's taken us over the last like 7 years, like for you being at a point now to then we're launching something that's the largest thing that we've ever built. And now it's like, oh, and you know what? And you've got a steep learning curve. I have a learning curve, and we're just going for it. But some people are like, oh man, you could have just been way farther along. But to me, I would have skipped some steps as far as my value and my development. And so I think that's what's important, is that you will feel like you're losing sometimes, but it won't feel like a loss if you actually understand what your value, what your scoreboard is. And the other thing too is this is just part of it. You're going to do right by people, and they're not going to do right by you. It's human nature. And that's why I think other people have to understand. Listen, we live in a world, and I always say this, right? I say it in our church all the time. Human beings suck, right? All that stuff you've heard about, oh man, people are just naturally good. They're not. They're not. Literally. Again, because of, and I won't go into why I think that, whatever. But here's the thing, is that people are going to like do some stuff. Like, you're going to get hurt in this life. And if you don't expect that, then that's when people get messed up. And that's when they start to lose their values and ethics, because what they do, they don't process that pain. And when you don't process that pain, what that turns into is anger, hatred, bitterness, whatever. And then what that will do is you'll say, no one's ever going to make me feel that way again. So what you will do is say, I don't want to feel that way. So whatever my value is over here, that doesn't matter anymore. It's just, I'm going to protect myself from never feeling that again. And so I think you have to have an expectation you will get hurt, and then you have to have the thing, you have to process that. You have to work through that, because if not, you will violate your values.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I guess something that I was thinking about whenever you were talking is how, and you've got into this a little bit too, when you started talking about what does it mean to win, because I feel I truthfully, and maybe my opinion will change because I'll grow up and have different thoughts over time. But it just kind of feels like when your goal ultimately is to continue to grow and being a high character person, you're just not playing the same game. It's like, it's not, based off of how I define it, I win every time by doing the right thing. Yep. And we're not playing the same game with the same scoreboard. Yep. And I've never seen a situation for a person who continuously does the right thing not gain more long term than the person who chooses
something short term. No, you're absolutely right. And I love how you put that. I mean, it is, and we talk a ton about that. You have to understand what game you are playing. You have to be honest with yourself. And what that means is that either you're going to play the game that you're supposed to play, or you're going to play the game of society. And here's what the game of society gets measured by. It's real simple. It's money, power, influence, right? Like that's it. Like, it's who has the most money, who has the most power, quote unquote, or influence or follower, whatever that thing is. Like, that's just the game. And what you're doing is you're like, that's why when you go in these, you go to these places where people with a lot of wealth, and I've been in these environments, man, it's just like, these people are just like, they're just, buying things, doing things that just kind of compete with each other. And it's just like, and it's very shallow. And again, if that's your thing, do your thing. But in the end, that's what you're measuring against, versus saying, no, what game am I playing? What am I supposed to do? Who's the best in the world of what I'm competing at? Versus, I'm not competing against everyone else. I have a game that I'm playing. And again, truth is, I'm not competing against, here's the God honest truth, I'm not competing against anybody. That's the thing. When you get really free is when you start realizing, I'm not competing against anybody. Because in the end, I have a game I'm trying to win. And when you start to think that way, I do believe exponential growth happens. And I believe because when you're really living out, because I think when you're living out of your characters and your values and your ethics, I believe that starts to happen. And then that starts to really flow throughout life. And that is what's happening right now in our nation that we live in right now, is that we have lost the ability to even understand what are good ethics, what are not good ethics. It has literally become like, man, do whatever it means to win. And what that means is like, whatever's going to keep you in power. That's literally all it is right now. And that is why we have such a we have such a low bar right now of leadership. And while we struggle right now to have any real leaders within our country, is because it's been about what can we do for me to keep power, not what I can do for the betterment of humanity. And so that's it. That's why you ever notice when like people like, you ever like when you, and I don't know how much of the, history and stuff like that, I study this stuff all the time. When you see somebody like who at one point in time, they're like this advocate, this rebel who's coming in to take over a country that's been ruled by a dictator. And then they become worse than a dictator. It's why they get power and they don't create structures in order to let their values that push them to get to that place in order for that to go forth. And what they end up doing is they keep the same system and structure as the dictator did, and they become twice as bad as the dictator that was there. And so again, I say all that, it's a long way to get to this fact. I think people have to get it to the point to where the point of living this thing out is what is better for other people. And I think that that's what we're looking for. And you have to create those places that allow you to do that.
Yeah, I think just circling back to magnum opus, the art of becoming one of one, something we say all the time is understanding your purpose. So understanding what makes you one of one has everything to do with you and nothing to do with you.
Yep.
Has everything to do with you because it is your call, your purpose, your unique design, but has nothing to do with you because it should always be for the benefit of other human beings and for humanity as a whole.
Yep. Absolutely. Because I think that is what humans have been designed to do. Purpose, calling, meaning, whatever you want to say, was never meant for just you. And when it's about you, it always will corrupt because it was never meant to do that. Because when you have a calling or a purpose, whatever, that's powerful. Power was never meant to be static. Power was always meant to move. And so your meaning and purpose is powerful because what that is, that gives you the ability to create something in the earth. And so if you're using your power, your skill set, those things, and you just do it just for me, what that ends up doing, it ends up being someone where like, it's just imagine like you're just consuming. And again, it was never meant to be that way. And so I think that as we talk about this book and as we talk about becoming wonderful one, you have to understand, and I'm going to keep echoing this, that it is about you. It is about you, but it's not about you. And that is so hard for us today, excuse me, in an anxiety-filled culture to where we drive black and white thinking because of our anxiety, to where you can't hold two truths. Those two truths are equally as important. It is about you because it's yours, and you should want to find it. You should go through all the hard work to actually figure it out. But on the other side, in the same type of intensity, you should leverage all of that once you find it to go give it to humanity. And here's what I've learned over the years. When you do that, the stuff that you actually hope for, that if you were in your own control and power and I was selfish, you even get that even more. That's one of the biggest things I've learned in my life. I have had so many worries about what I be taking care of over time. And it's something I've always wrestled with because it's just a lie in the messaging of my life. But as I've constantly been a person to leverage what I've been given for others, to help solve problems, to help others be impacted, whatever, man, I've been given back. The interest on it is just, it's exponential. Hey guys, I hope today was actually helpful for you. And again, I would encourage you is that go pre-order the book because we actually do deeper dives in all these things. But here's what I want to talk to you about, the rule of 77. Maybe for you, there's one thing, one value that you have. Whatever that value is, what I want to challenge you with today is how does that value play out in your everyday life? Would people know if they actually sat with you? Could they say, and you said, hey, what do you think are the 5 things I value? Could people write that out? Could somebody very close to you write out what those 5 values are? And if they couldn't do that, then what you need to look at is saying, maybe, just maybe, I need to start making some changes in the systems of my life in order for those things to happen. Until next time, keep writing.